Let's delve into some of the other parts of these. One thing that stood out to me a lot was tasks. Coming from the node world, I love to rely on my scripts in my package.json, and tasks give me a very similar feel. And Mise as a tool almost feels like a package.json for everything. So what are tasks and how can I use them in my work?
It's exactly what it is, right? I love NPM run tests. It's just any Node developer loves just being able to jump in a project and run these conventional sort of commands that are used with pretty much all Node projects. Yeah, that's my goal. Is I want to bring that experience to the polyglot world where you can have that same experience when you jump into Python projects, jump into Go projects. And yeah, that's the idea, right? Is to have that common interface. And I think that like package.json tasks, for example, they're very limited, right? There's not a lot of functionality there. And a lot of times there's some boilerplate, right? Like maybe it just runs a bash script. And so with Mise, I try to think about all the different ways people want to define tasks, right? Sometimes that is just a bash script, right? And in Mise, that step is unnecessary, right? If you just put your files in the right place, Mise will just pick it up and it'll know that script is a task and it'll present it as such to the user. So you can generate your task documentation and you can have dependencies and stuff. It's all wired up as if it was in the configuration file. But then also sometimes having your tasks in TOML is good too. Sometimes you just have 5 or 6 tasks that are all just one line of code. And so that can all just live there as well.
Yeah, it's also an improvement because like you can't do comments in package.json. So I end up with this enormous block of scripts where I can't tell anybody what they're for at all. And the way you can now mix Mise with usage and get like full featured docs for your script section is super, super nice.
And like completion is the thing I get most excited about. So like with Mise tasks, you can very easily have a completion for, let's say you have a dash username flag on a task. You can define another task that all it needs to do is print to standard out a bunch of usernames. So like maybe that's going into some API or something. It's very easy to do. And as long as completions are working in Mise normally, that just all gets wired up. And so you type Mise run, name of task, dash username, tab, boom, there's your users.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so the package.json has a lot of drawbacks. So the comment thing I think is true. Oftentimes people install a separate dependency to be able to run tasks in parallel, for example. And so Mise has like parallel tasks sort of out of the box. You have like dependencies. So you can do pre and post in a package.json, but it's gross. But you can actually do dependencies. I love the fact that you can wait on something to complete. If something else is running, you don't actually have to say, oh, I want you to run this, but if it's running, I just want to wait until it's done. That's super powerful. There's so much. The tasks are so rich. And I think when I really got the value, I had a project where I had installed Wrangler, the CLI tool for Cloudflare, as a dependency of the project because like I needed it to build. But ideally, I wouldn't install it as a dependency. Like hopefully it'd be globally available. So I like used the NPM like backend for Mise to install the thing, and you just like Mise run build, and it like runs the build script and it makes sure that Wrangler is installed, does all this stuff. And I was like, this is really powerful in a lot of ways, especially combining the two between managing the dependencies and installing things. And then I think the project that I was mentioning earlier that I was doing, that's like a Rust project that like uses a bunch of other languages. So it's Rust, it's Python, and it's Deno. And it'll install all of them. It'll set them up, and I can do Mise run gen, and it'll do run gen Python, run gen-deno, and make sure everything is set up correctly. And typically, it's a hard task. I mean, like Deno doesn't really have a blessed version manager, and I don't know. There's so much stuff, and it's like the fact that I have all of that in one file it's super powerful, and it's a pretty incredible like DX. So one of the other things that is like a pretty cool feature is like you have hooks that just came out of experimental. So it's like you can add a hook for like when you enter the directory or leave the directory. So what was the motivation and inspiration for hooks? We talked about Pitchfork earlier. It sounds like a similar thing.
Frankly, hooks is an exhaust valve, so I don't have to implement that. So basically, as people have started to use Mise for very advanced things, people started to ask for crazy features that I just am not going to be able to develop, right? And hooks was an attempt for me to figure out, okay, I'm not going to be able to develop all these things. Let's, as an example, there was a user that wanted the ability to have 1Password generate a bunch of secret environment variables that then could enter in the project. I don't want to go out and build that integration. So hooks are a way that I could build a place that they could define that themselves. So now this user can have an enter hook that when they enter the directory, it'll call 1Password, generate the secrets file, and then Mise can import that. Another one was that a user wanted to have, so Mise has support for automatically creating and activating a Python virtual env. And they wanted that virtual env to come with some set of packages that, for whatever reason, they don't want to have in their requirements.txt. And so, once again, this gives them that ability, right? Because they could just run pip install, uv install, whatever. And so, I think it does a great job at that, because these things are not hard to write. But ultimately, it just solves those, or it gives the user the ability to solve those advanced use cases without Mise needing to get more complicated than it is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one last feature to cover in Mise is environment variables. And we can talk about secrets as well. So this is .env, great tool, really powerful, have a .env file and like automatically import those when you start up your program. It is another dependency. It's a very load-bearing dependency. Anything that reads your environment variables is, but like Mise has a lot of functionality to help manage environment variables. So would you like to talk through a little bit of those and how you think about environment variables? And maybe if you have any thoughts on having a good like secure setup and any tips that you've built into Mise for that would be cool.
Yeah. What's funny, the way you pitched that is actually more the reason it exists. So this started because it was easy. Because when I built the tool management stuff for Mise, some tools, Java, for example, needs to set the Java home variable. And so it was trivial for me to just allow the user to define any arbitrary environment variables they want. And so initially it was just, I just threw it in because it was simple. But I found myself, and a lot of users mentioned that they were able to not use durenv or other similar tools. And it was just convenient to just, they've already got Mise, and now they could just put this in one place and it's convenient. So that was the case for a long time. But as people used it more and as Mise grew, people had identified more use cases that were pretty compelling. Python VM was a big one. Python users love that they don't need to type source.vm/whatever to activate their virtual env when they enter a project. They can just, another one was secrets management. So having this .m file, and this, I guess I'm getting to your question about secure practice and stuff, but it's not good to have your AWS creds just sitting in a file.
Really?
Actually, fun fact, when I worked at Heroku, I actually sent the prod creds to the AWS S3 bucket in the NPM package. And it was sitting there for a while until we got a bug report from somebody that, because I just had the file sitting there, and the way NPM publish works is it just package it right up and send the .m file out. It's just not good to have those files in plain text. And so Mise will use a tool called SOPS and Auge, which allow you to encrypt those. And if that ever happens and those files end up out there, they're encrypted, so nobody can get to them.